We didn't want perfect to be the enemy of the good. The Constitutional Convention created in a way that would be seen as fair, that would actually have a real discourse among citizens about these issues, and that could lead to common sense solutions going back before the people. We tried to do as little polling as possible in this process, because my own experience is that today elected officials and policymakers are far too much driven by polling, and so they have a tendency to spit back at you what you already believe, and if what you already believe isn't too smart, you're not going to, it's impeding the society. But that said, you have to be realistic too. So we checked it out, and one of the key findings, and it wasn't a surprise, but the intensity of it was, is that the public absolutely doesn't trust the elected officials. They don't trust elite groups. They basically are out of trust, and the only folks they might trust are the person looking at them in the mirror and their neighbors. There's some trust for the common citizen. And so we designed a process that was geared around the common citizen and hopefully coming up with common sense solutions. We believe, so we started going around the state and talking about it in forums like this. And what was interesting is whether you were in the mountain regions or in San Diego or LA or San Francisco or the Central Valley, people tend to have the same values. They want to live in a safe community. They want to have education for their kids. They don't mind paying, for the most part, tax dollars, but they don't want the money going to waste. These are very common themes that you hear everywhere, no matter what the people look like, no matter what the socioeconomic condition. And so we believe, as a result of that if you could put a large group of folks together who really looked like California, really represented the diversity of the state, they would arrive at common sense solutions. They might not be everything I would like as the head of a business association. I'm not suggesting that a group of everyday citizens would necessarily come up with what the business community might find as its best agenda. But on the whole, they're going to do common sense stuff, and they would have the best and maybe only chance of convincing their fellow citizens to support it. Because at the end of the day, after the Constitutional Convention would take place, it will require a vote of the people to support what they're doing. All they can do is suggest it. So we came up with this process. It involves, in 2010 November, putting two measures on the ballot. One that would enable the public to call a constitutional convention, a power we do not have today. And number two, actually calling it. And in that second measure, stipulating the process by which delegates would be selected, how the thing would be managed, how the delegates would be compensated, and so forth, what issues they would talk about, and what things they wouldn't talk about. We quickly heard from the public they didn't want a constitutional convention that got into the human rights issues, the guns, things like that. Those are divisive issues. We want to talk about government, about the way the legislature operates, about the way we get a budget passed on time every year, about the fiscal relationships between the state capital, which has assumed control of our tax dollars, versus local governments and school boards who used to have that control and saw it taken away over time. And management in general, how services are delivered, what services and how they're delivered. So we put all that into the legal language, and we actually finished those ballot measures. We submitted them to the Attorney General, and we're expecting that to be approved soon so that we can begin collecting signatures for this. We have to collect about 1.8 million signatures to assure, in a 5-month period, to assure that this will go on the ballot in November. If they're approved by the voters by a 50% majority, then 50% plus one, I guess it would be, then they would go on the ballot. Then we would hold a constitutional convention in 2011. It would have approximately 461 delegates. It would take probably about 6 months to hold the convention. A little more than half the delegates would come out of a random selection process in the assembly districts around the state. You could get something in the mail that says, you've been selected, do you want to do this? And then those who say they want to do it, there'll be another round, and it will break down to maybe 40 or 50 people in each assembly district who will get together and pick 3. So this could be a room of people from this assembly district, and you'd have to figure out, of the 50 of you, which 3 get to go to this convention. By a combination of the boards of supervisors, mayors of some of the cities, and a school board member in every county of the state. This assures geographic diversity. It assures that the cities, the local governments and school districts, which have been the most disaffected by the state constitution and state government. I can tell you this from having been a deputy mayor of San Francisco, city and county, what it was like to have the state reach deeply into our pocket with no warning and take a bad budget system and make it horrifying. And this is what they've been doing over the years, and they'll continue to do it as long as it's enabled. In 2011, we hold a convention with a group that looks like that. Hopefully they'll make recommendations. We think they will. They'll come together as a group and understand this is their one-shot deal. There's some preclusions on people who can serve. It's not a convention for lobbyists. It's not a convention for sitting elected officials. It's for sort of regular citizens, but virtually all regular citizens if you're not from those groups. In 2012 November, it would then go on the ballot. So there'd be enough time, unlike a typical initiative campaign, there would be enough time for the people of California to really look at what these recommendations, and for the delegates to go back to their districts and explain to their neighbors why they went in the direction that they did. It's a bit of a crapshoot. You know, you wouldn't do this if everything was good. But let me tell you, everything's not good. As bad as how it really is, if it were analyzed properly. And you know, we know we have, according to the legislative analysts, a $20 billion structural deficit now, plus 20 billion plus. But that doesn't even take into account the money we've borrowed recently, which in the last 10 years, as the governor would say, to kick the can down the road. It's a very serious situation, and we can't. You know, I got 4 kids, 2 coming out of college and 2 entering the public school system. You know, I can't in good conscience ignore this. I could work on other stuff. We at the Mayor and Council, we're not going to achieve our education agenda. We're not going to fix the transportation system. We're not going to see the implementation of a water system that deals with the threats associated with that, go down the line and so forth. We're going to see what you're reading about in the international press, which is the failure of California and analysis of what happened to California. I say enough is enough. We need to take a shot at the one approach that we believe, we strongly believe, the more we look at it, the more strongly we believe that this could work. So I think I've sort of outlined why we did it and the process itself, because there's usually a lot of questions about the hows of it, and I don't want to take you too deeply into the weeds, but you get the idea. And I think I'll stop it there. It's been a lot of work. It's been quite an interesting ride to this point, but now we have to qualify the measures. We have to build a statewide campaign of people, the likes of which has never been seen, to resist the special interest pressure there's going to be to stop this. Because this is a real threat to the status quo. This is a threat to the institutions. It really is. And people who even those who say, well, I don't like the way things are, but I'm more comfortable with it because maybe I make money from it, or I'm more assured my position out of it, there's going to be resistance to this from those folks. For everybody else, I think that folks will see this as an amazing opportunity for California to make history in a good way, and perhaps even drive a national, because we are leaders nationally, to drive a national discussion, because a lot of the problems that we have in California are the same problems that we have in Washington. The difference in Washington is, you know, they can print money easier there than we can do. But beside that, the same kind of ideological breakdown that's occurred, you see it affected every day in the halls of Congress.